I took the Okefenokee job because my truck needed a transmission and the state survey paid fast. They handed me a laminated map, a spare battery, and a cheap radio that already crackled. I planned to launch, fly 2 nest count grids, log coordinates, and be back at the dock before the heat turned me. I went alone because my usual spotter bailed and I didn't want to lose the money. I kept smearing bug spray with greasy hands because the nozzle leaked and coated my fingers. The spray made my grip slick, and it stung the cuts on my knuckles from wrenching on the truck the night before. The launch was quiet in that fake way, just fans from the trees and the soft pop of gators dropping off banks when you get too close. I shoved the kayak off, clipped the radio to my vest, and sent the drone up as soon as I had open sky. The first hour stayed normal. Slow paddling, drone up, notes down, gators like floating logs on the banks. I kept the kayak tight to the channel so I wouldn't scrape bottom or drift into a nest line. The drone hovered low enough I could hear its pitch change when the wind shifted. Every couple minutes I'd glance down at my screen, tap a pin, scribble a coordinate, and keep moving. The radio hissed, my phone had 1 bar, and the sun kept climbing. I told myself to stop being a baby about the water because it's always water out there. Then I rounded a bend and saw meat hanging from a line, big chunks swinging low over the water. Not fish heads, not scraps, slabs. A gator slid under it, silent, too practiced. Somebody had been feeding them. The meat didn't look old either. It dripped. The line was bright nylon, tied clean, and the steak in the mud looked fresh like it had been hammered in that morning. I stopped paddling and the kayak drifted. The drone hummed above the trees like a mosquito with a paycheck. I aimed the camera at the line because the state loves evidence, and I figured maybe I could at least report something real. I thumbed the radio and tried to call the station, but all I got was crackle and a soft pop, like the speaker was drowning too. I tapped it, swore, tried again. Nothing. That's when an airboat coughed in the reeds. It was right there, half hidden, idling low. 2 men sat in it like they'd been waiting. One raised a hand and pointed back the way I came. Not a suggestion, a command. The other guy didn't move at all, just stared at me and the drone controller like he was doing math. My stomach dropped because it clicked fast. The meat wasn't random, and they weren't surprised to see me. I lifted my hand like, yeah, okay, and started turning because I'm not brave, I'm broke. I kept my head down and tried to look official anyway, like a laminated badge would protect me. The cheap radio crackled harder and then went quiet like it picked that moment to die. The drone battery alarm chirped and I cursed under my breath. I hesitated 1 stupid second because losing a drone means losing rent. That second cost me. The gator hit the meat, rolled, and the wake slapped my kayak sideways. Another gator bumped the hull from underneath like a test bite. I stabbed the paddle into the water and tried to steady myself, and my own cooler shifted and threw me off balance. I felt the kayak roll, and my brain did that useless thing where it shouts NO after it's already happening. I flipped. Black water filled my ears. Something brushed my calf, smooth, heavy, and my whole body went cold in a way heat can't fix. I kicked hard, came up choking, and grabbed for anything solid. The kayak was upside down, drifting. The hanging meat swung slow, like a pendulum. I kicked toward the nearest cypress knee and hauled myself up, shaking so hard my hands kept slipping. Bark tore my palms. Mud sucked at my boots. I got my chest over the knee and clamped down like it was a life raft. My vest rode up and squeezed my ribs, and I couldn't get a full breath without tasting swamp. The men didn't rush to help. They just watched calm, like this was entertainment they paid for. One of them yelled a single line, should have stayed on trail, and laughed. The laugh hit me worse than the water. I tried to scream back, but it came out like a cough. The gators circled tighter, eyes like dull coins, noses cutting little V's in the surface. One bumped the wood under me, and the whole knee shivered. Another rolled slow, like it wanted me to see its belly and understand how close it was. I could smell raw meat and that sour reptile stink, and my own fear, and I hated that it all mixed together. I clung to that cypress knee until my forearms locked and my nails tore. I tried to move slow because every splash felt like ringing a bell. I hooked an arm over the knee and reached for the kayak's grab loop, inch by inch. A gator slid close enough that I could see the ridges on its back, just under the skin of the water. I didn't look away. I pulled the kayak in, flipped it with one ugly heave, and belly flopped into it like a drunk. I didn't even get seated right. I just started paddling. When they finally roared off, they left the meat hanging. They left me there with the animals trained to expect food. The airboat didn't chase me. That almost felt worse, like I wasn't even worth finishing. I kept paddling anyway, shoulders burning, throat raw from swallowing swamp. Twice something bumped the hull, and I almost puked. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The drone alarm chirped again somewhere above the canopy and then cut out. I let it die. I told myself I'd come back with law enforcement, but even as I thought it, it sounded like a lie I was telling my own shaking hands. I made it back at dusk, scraped raw, coughing swamp out of my lungs. I dragged the kayak up like dead weight and limped to the ranger station, dripping on their floor. My phone finally got signal and started dumping missed texts like nothing happened. I told them about the meat line and the airboat and getting flipped. The ranger nodded like I'd said the water was wet. He didn't take my name right away. He didn't ask for a description. He kept his pen on the counter like it was a prop. I pushed the laminated map at him and jabbed the bin with my finger until the plastic creased. He finally made a show of writing something, but it was quick and sideways. And then he closed the pad and slid it away. I asked him straight up if he was going to do anything or if I should just accept that people feed gators for sport out here. He leaned back, eyes flat, and told me to be careful where you fly. Let my drone caused it. I told him I nearly got eaten, and he told me I shouldn't be out there alone. I told him the state sent me alone. He shrugged like that settled it. That shrug lit my fuse, and I said, loud, that this felt like somebody was running a trap, and he was helping them by pretending he didn't see it. He snapped back that I didn't know what I was talking about, and if I kept making accusations, he'd have me removed from the refuge and blacklisted from contracts. I shut up because I needed the money, and I hated myself for shutting up. On the way out, I saw an airboat trailer at the far end of the ramp lot. No plats. Fresh mud. Fresh blood dripped off the tailgate in slow threads like someone had butchered something right there. I walked back and pointed. The ranger glanced once and looked away like you do when you don't want to remember a face. He said, "Hunters," and went inside. I stood there staring at the blood until it hit me the trailer looked recently used, like it had just been unhooked. I got in my truck and locked the doors even though that's stupid and everybody knows it. I drove home with swamp water drying in my hair and my hands shaking on the wheel. I called the state number they give you for incidents. A woman answered like it was a help desk and asked for my contractor ID before she asked if I was okay. When I told her my drone was gone, her tone tightened and she started talking about asset recovery and documentation. I told her to document the meat and the blood and the men feeding gators. She paused, then said she'd escalate it and asked if I could still finish the second grid later in the week because the deadline didn't move. I told her to go fuck herself and hung up. After that, my brain didn't shut off. I kept checking my peephole. I kept listening for engines. I woke up because something scraped in the hallway and it turned out to be a neighbor dragging trash. But my heart didn't care. The next day, I walked out to my truck and checked under it for something tied to the frame like I turned into a paranoid idiot overnight. I tried to tell myself nobody cared about me. I was just a random guy with a drone. Then I remembered the way that airboat sat in the reeds, already angled, already waiting, and the way they watched me like they knew exactly how this would go. 2 nights later, somebody slid an envelope under my apartment door. Inside was a printed photo of me on that cypress knee, mid-shake, taken from the reeds. I led the Okefenokee day paddle because the troop needed an adventure badge and the parents wanted photos. I mapped a short loop promised an early lunch, and packed extra water like I was being responsible. I brought 2 kids with me in a tandem canoe because their dads couldn't make it and I didn't want to cancel. I told myself we'd stay on marked trails and keep it simple. I also made the dumb choice of wearing cotton socks because I forgot my dry pair and didn't want to hear myself complain. I should have canceled anyway. Not because it was unsafe on paper, but because you can feel when a day's already sliding wrong and you're the idiot insisting it'll be fine. At the launch, the parents swarmed like we were filming a commercial. Phones out, sun hats, somebody asking if we could angle the boats for a picture. I did the checklist voice, PFD's tight, stay with the group, don't horse around, and half the kids listened like they were watching a video on mute. The 2 boys in my canoe started chirping immediately, poking each other's paddles, arguing about who got the good seat. I told them to cut it out. One smirk like that was the whole point. I could already see the day, me grinding through it while everybody else gets cute photos and a badge. The first stretch went okay, just enough to lull me. Then the heat turned mean fast. Sweat ran into my eyes. The bugs chewed through spray like it was a joke. The boys stopped paddling in sync and started keeping score instead, like it was a competition to prove who was doing less. The boat drifted. I kept correcting. They got mad at me for bossing. I said, fine, paddle straight then. One of them slapped the water at a bug and the canoe yawed hard. I told him to stop messing around. He muttered something under his breath, little punk shit, and the other one laughed. That laugh got me. It's such a small thing, but it's the sound of kids deciding you're not real authority, just some adult they can wear down. I snapped, not screaming, but sharp enough that both of them went quiet and stared at the front like I'd insulted their entire bloodline. Then the guilt hit me because I don't like being that guy. But the heat and the whining and the constant stupid pushing at each other made the guilt thin and useless. We slid off the marked channel without anyone noticing until it was too late. It wasn't dramatic. 1 second we were moving, then the bow nosed into weeds and stopped like we'd hit a curb. I tried backing out. The paddle came up tangled. The boys started talking at once, blaming me, blaming each other, asking if we were lost, saying the other canoes were leaving us. I told them to shut up and hold still while I worked. They did the exact opposite, shifting their weight, making the hull rock. I leaned forward to free the bow, and the canoe scraped again, stuck worse. I could hear other kids ahead, faint, and it pissed me off that the group kept moving like nothing mattered. My radio crackled with someone saying, "Keep it tight, folks," and I almost laughed. Tight where? This swamp doesn't give a shit about your plan. I climbed out to push and my feet dropped in a muck up to my shins. My shoes disappeared like the ground swallowed them. My cotton socks soaked through and turned heavy and slick, and I knew right then I made a stupid mistake. I tried to brace and push the canoe forward, but every step sank. Something cold wrapped my ankle. I looked down and saw leeches, fat and dark, pulsing against my skin. I flicked one off and another latched on. I felt the suction, slow and firm, like a clamp that didn't hurt until you realized it was feeding. I try not to freak out because I had 2 kids staring at me. I pushed anyway. The canoe moved maybe an inch. The boys started up again, panicked now, not just bickering. One said he felt something bump the hull. The other said I was going to get us killed. I told him to stop saying that shit. He didn't. He kept going, voice climbing, and I snapped again louder, telling him if he didn't sit down and paddle when I told him, we'd flip, and then he could see what killed looks like. He shut up, and I hated myself for talking like that to a kid, but I also needed him to obey right then, not later. The water around my legs moved. Not from me, not from wind. A slow swirl, like something big turned in place. I froze. I felt a hard nudge against my calf, and my whole body jerked like I'd been hit with a wire. My hand slapped the canoe for balance. The weeds parted and a gator's head surfaced a few feet away, eyes half-lidded, calm as a rock. It didn't lunge. It didn't thrash. It just watched me in that blank way, like it was waiting for me to make a mistake instead of wasting effort. The boys saw it, and both of them made these thin little sounds, not even words. One started crying right there, quiet and broken. The other one grabbed the gunnel and tried to scoot backward, which rocked the canoe hard. I barked at him to sit the fuck down. He did, shaking. I tried to climb back in because being in the muck felt like being tied to a stake, but my sock slid in my shoe and my foot shot out. My knee slammed the gunnel. Pain flashed white. I tasted blood from biting my tongue. The gator sank without a ripple, like it never existed. The water went smooth. That was the worst part. If it stayed visible, at least my brain had something to aim at. When it vanished, the whole swamp became the gator. I forced my arms to work. I hauled myself into the canoe, mud dripping off my legs, leeches still clinging. The boys stared at my ankles like they expected to see chunks missing. I wanted to tell them it was fine, but it wasn't. I jammed my paddle down and used it like a pry bar, levering the canoe forward. I did again. Again. Each shove hurt my knee, and the leeches tugged when my sock shifted. The boys finally paddled when I told them, short, frantic strokes, splashing water into the boat. I didn't care. I just needed us moving. I kept my eyes on the weeds ahead, waiting for that head to pop up again. I kept listening for anything behind us, which is stupid because sound does weird shit out there, and every splash becomes a threat when you're already scared. The radio crackled again, someone asking where we were. I said, "We got hung up, but we're moving," like I was reporting a flat tire. I didn't say gator. I didn't want the whole troop turning around, bunching up, doing something even dumber. We crawled back into the channel. When the water opened up again, I should have felt relief. I didn't. I felt hollow, like the swamp had taken something and didn't bother giving it back. The boys stayed silent, except for sniffing. One kept wiping his face with his sleeve like he was ashamed of crying. The other kept looking over his shoulder. I told them to keep paddling. We caught up to the group late. The other leaders asked what happened, casual, like it was just a delay. I said we got stuck. One of them laughed and said, "Classic." I stared at him until he stopped smiling. We hit the lunch spot and everyone acted normal. Unwrapping food, taking pictures, talking about the badge requirements. One parent volunteer on shore later would tell me the kids were so excited when they got back. That's bullshit. These two didn't eat much. They just sat there, wet and quiet, like they were trying to be invisible. The paddle back to the dock felt longer than it should have. I stayed dead center on the markers and kept correcting the boys if they drifted. One of them started to complain, and I cut him off fast. I mean, just final. He didn't argue. I think he could tell I had nothing left to negotiate with. When we finally landed, parents rushed up immediately, all smiles until they saw mud streaked down my legs and the boys' faces. Then the questions turned sharp. Why are they crying? Why are they covered in gunk? Why is my son saying there was a gator right next to your boat? One dad got right in my space like he wanted to make it physical, like I'd personally drag his kid into a bear trap. I told him we got stuck in weeds off the channel for a few minutes and a gator surfaced nearby. I kept it calm. I kept it short. That didn't help. People don't want facts when they're scared. They want someone to punish. Another parent started in about better planning, and I almost said, "You planned it too. You pushed for it. You wanted the photos." I didn't say that. I just got the boys out, handed them off, and sat on the ground for a second because my hands wouldn't stop shaking and my knee felt like it had a heartbeat. That night, I peeled my socks off and watched tiny black leech bites open across my ankles like a rash of mouths. One leech was still attached, stubborn, swollen with me. I pulled it free and it popped, and I stared at the mess in my sink and thought, I brought kids into a place that doesn't care if you're leading. I scrubbed my legs until they burned. I couldn't scrub the feeling out. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the water move around my calves. I felt that nudge again, like a calm little reminder that I've been standing in the wrong place, pretending I was in charge. I kept replaying the moment my sock slipped and my knee slammed and the gator vanished. It wasn't even a dramatic attack story. That's what made it worse. It was just proximity. A quiet decision by something ancient that I wasn't worth the effort yet. I went to the next troop meeting and watched parents laugh and hand out snacks and talk about the fun adventure like it was a theme park. I couldn't stand it. I quit the troop the next week. I told everyone it was time constraints. I didn't tell them the truth, that I could still feel that calm nudge against my leg whenever I closed my eyes. I agreed to clean the backcountry platforms because nobody else wanted the stink job and the overtime was real. The plan was simple. Paddle out, scrape off fish guts and trash, swap out a rotten board, and sleep on the platform so I could hit 2 more dawn. I went solo because my coworker called it gator bait and refused. I packed a headlamp, a little pry bar, and a gas station burrito that turned my stomach before I even left the dock. My boss shoved the work order at me, like it was my fault people kept turning the place into a landfill. I told him we were short-staffed and the ranger station had been ignoring it for months. He told me to stop making excuses and said if I wanted hours, this was the kind of work that came with them. I took it because rent doesn't care if you feel disrespected. At the dock, my coworker watched me load the canoe and kept smirking. I asked him to at least help carry the replacement plank. He leaned back and said, "Nah, I'm not getting eaten for you." I snapped that he was a lazy bitch and he laughed like I proved his point. That was the last thing I needed in my head. I reached the platform while the sky still had color. It looked worse up close. Scales glued to the boards, old line wrapped around the post, hooks snapped off in the wood, and a slick smear baked into the grain. I stepped around a dark stain that I pretended was fish. I found a heap of guts shoved under the edge like somebody tried to hide it. I kicked it loose and it slapped off the platform with a heavy sound. I got to work. I scraped until my forearms cramped, pried out screws that crumbled, and stuffed cans, bait tubs, rotting towels, and cigarette packs into a trash bag that already stank. I yanked line off a cleat and it snapped back and whipped my wrist. I swore so loud it echoed off the trees. I busted a knuckle on a rusty screw, watched the blood bead up in slime, and kept going because stopping meant thinking. I swapped the rotten board by myself, levering it up inch by inch, fighting nails that squealed, then forcing the new plank down until it sat flat. The old plank felt too heavy for a piece of wood. I dropped it and it splashed like something bigger than it should have been. I ate half the burrito, hated it, and threw the rest into a sealed trash bag because I wasn't feeding anything out there. My stomach rolled anyway. I drank warm water from my jug, wiped my mouth, and almost laughed because I could taste fish even though I hadn't eaten fish. I checked my phone, got nothing useful, and stayed put because I didn't want to lose the hours. I clipped my headlamp to the post, kept my boots on, and lay down with the pry bar beside my hip. I didn't get comfortable. I kept my knees bent like I might have to spring up. Dart dropped fast. The noise didn't bother me until it changed. 1 second it was messy, then it lined up in waves like a pattern. Frogs fired off in bursts, then stopped together, then started again like someone cued them. I stared at the headlamp beam and tried to slow my breathing. I told myself it was just night doing night stuff and my brain was being dramatic. Something bumped the platform. Not a splash, a solid thunk against the support post, like a shoulder checking a door. The vibration ran straight through the boards into my spine. I sat up and listened. Another thunk, slower, patient. I swept the light and caught eyes low to the surface, wide apart, then they sank without a ripple. I slapped the boards, stomped once, and made noise. Nothing left. The bumping shifted to a different post. Then another, corner to corner, like it was testing the whole thing. It kept a rhythm. It paused like it was waiting for me to relax, then hit again. I told myself, one gator, curious, move on. But it stayed too steady. I moved to the center and kept the light moving. My hands sweated so hard the pry bar felt slick. Then my trash bag rustled behind me. I spun and saw it drag a few inches across the boards. No wind. It didn't flutter. It slid like somebody had a grip on it from below. I grabbed the top and yanked. It yanked back, hard enough to pull my shoulder forward. Whatever was under there wasn't nibbling. It was taking. I yanked again, and my boots skidded on slime, and I almost went down. I caught myself on the post, and my heart hammered so hard it hurt. I dropped to a knee and felt around the gap with the pry bar, trying to hook the plastic free. The boards creaked under the pull. The bag kept tugging in short jerks, like whoever had it was getting pissed. I jammed the pry bar into the gap and levered down. The wood groaned. The bag jerked and ripped open, and wet trash slid across the boards and touched my hand. The smell that came up wasn't normal garbage. It was hot rot and old fish slime, like something had been fermenting under me for weeks. I gagged and swallowed it down, and my eyes watered. I shoved the headlamp beam into the gap and saw a pale hand below the boards for half a second, fingers splayed, skin swollen and waxy. It looked human in the worst way. No scars, no clothes, just fat white fingers and a thumb, like it belonged on a person who should not be anywhere near a platform in the middle of nowhere. The fingers flexed once like it was feeling for the bag again, and I swear it aimed at me, not the trash. Then the hand vanished and something thrashed underneath, violent and close. The platform shook. The headlamp clattered against the post, and the beam jittered across my boots. I backed into the far corner and kept the light trained on the cracks, pry bar up like it mattered. I couldn't scream. My throat locked, and I just breathed through my nose and tried not to puke. I wanted to jump into the canoe and run, but I couldn't make myself step near the gaps. I stood there pinned by my own fear, watching the boards like they were going to open. And then it stopped. Not just a thrashing. Everything. The frogs cut out. The bugs faded. The whole place went dead quiet like it was listening back. I sat down hard with my back against the corner post because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. I stared at the gaps, waiting for that hand to pop up and grab a foot. My legs cramped, and I refused to stretch them. I kept thinking about how easy it would be to hook an ankle through a crack and pull, and how nobody would ever call it anything but an accident. Hours dragged. My stomach kept twisting from the burrito and the smell. Every time I swallowed, I tasted rot. Gray morning finally leaked in. When I could see the boards without the headlamp, I grabbed the shredded bag and my tools, didn't bother cleaning the spill, and got the hell out. I climbed into the canoe like the platform might bite me and paddled back hard, shoulders burning, eyes stinging from staying open all night. I kept scanning the post for fresh marks and telling myself not to look down. At the dock, I went straight to the ranger station. The guy at the counter stared at me like I was wasting his air. I told him someone was under the platform, that it grabbed my trash, that I saw a hand. He asked if I'd been drinking. I told him to stop being a smartass and go out there with me. He said animals do weird things at night. I told him a gator doesn't have a pale hand. He finally called for an older ranger like he was humoring me. We went back in daylight. I hated every stroke getting there. When we arrived, the platform looked normal. No deep bug, no speed the garbage, no stink. The board sat clean enough to make me feel insane. The older ranger tapped around with his boot and shrugged. He told me my imagination got worked up. He said maybe a gator bumped the posts, and I snagged the bag on a nail and panicked. I told him I saw a hand. He smiled like I was a kid insisting on monsters. I got angry and told him to pull a board up and look underneath. He told me they weren't tearing up public infrastructure because a contractor had a bad night. I told him I wasn't going back alone. He said the assignment was still on my sheet and I should use better judgment next time. The way he said it made me want to throw up again, like he was blaming me for being grabbed. I left. I dumped the remaining supplies at the shop and told my boss he could go sleep on that platform himself if he wanted it done so bad. He threatened to write me up and said I was being dramatic. I told him to fucking do it. He called me dramatic. I called him cheap. We both knew he wasn't firing anyone that week. I tried to wash the smell off at home, and it wouldn't leave. I scrubbed my hands until my knuckles stung. I checked my gear twice like I expected to find something I didn't pack. I didn't tell anyone else. Saying it out loud made it sound fake, and I didn't want that look on people's faces. That night, I found my pry bar in my truck bed. I hadn't brought it home. It was wet and smelled like black water.